Welcome to the NT podcast, Science and Theology podcast, the best in the Balkans in this field. My name is Nemanja Jurišić, and today we have a special guest, Dr. Scott Stripling, a Director of Excavations for the Associate for Biblical Research, ABR, at Ancient Shiloh. Professor Stripling, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be with you today.
Thank you so much for your time. And at the beginning, can you tell us something more about yourself and your biography? What do you do for those maybe who don't know you well? So please.
Well, I'm a professor. I am also an administrator. I oversee the academic program here at the Bible Seminary, which includes a theological program and an archaeological program. And of course, I'm a field archaeologist, currently excavating at Tel Shiloh. I'm also the president of the board of directors for the Near East Archaeological Society. And I am married for 42 years. I have four grown children and 7 grandchildren.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So, Professor Stripling, today we will talk about your specialty, probably the biggest expert in this field about ancient Shiloh. For the beginning, on what basis we can identify this city, Tel Shiloh, as the biblical city of Shiloh? Yeah.
Judges chapter 21 is very specific about the location of Shiloh. It gives us 3 geographical indicators of where it was located, and north of Bethel, east of Livona. And so using those 3 points in Judges 21, it leads you right to Khirbet Siloon. And when Edward Robinson, back in the 19th century, was looking for biblical Shiloh, that's what he did. He took Judges 21 and it led him right to the spot. Later in the Danish excavation in the 1920s, the first excavation at Shiloh, in one of the churches, they uncovered an inscription that said, Lord Jesus, be merciful to the people of Shiloh. And so we have an inscription and we have the biblical description. So we're pretty confident, and I don't think anyone is disputing that this is biblical Shiloh.
Amazing. So I asked this just because of methodology for other maybe cities to know how to identify cities. So great. And can you explain the biblical background, why Shiloh is important in the biblical tradition? Yeah.
Well, Shiloh matters because that's where the Ark of the Covenant was. Joshua 18:1 says that Joshua ordered that the tabernacle be erected at Shiloh. So this becomes the center of Israelite life and worship for over 3 centuries. And he gives out the tribal allotments also for at the entrance to the tent of meeting for the 7 tribes who do not yet have their inheritance. So this becomes the place where people can come to find covering for their sins, to reconnect with God vertically and with others horizontally. And so over 3 centuries, this is where God places his name. Later, he says in the Iron Age 2 period, he says to Jeremiah, go now to Shiloh, where I first caused my name to dwell. See what I did there. And so that's essentially what we have come to do. We've come to Shiloh to see where God once dwelled and to see what the material culture is and how it corresponds with the biblical text.
Great. What are the most important discoveries made at Shiloh so far, such as some inscriptions, seals, pottery?
Well, we have 3 main areas of focus that we have uncovered in our first 7 seasons of excavation. The first is a monumental building that is east-west and matches the description of the biblical tabernacle, which, of course, the tabernacle transitioned from being a tent into a permanent building at some point. And we think we have that building and excavating at it, and so that's very exciting. Within that building, we have a number of cultic finds like miniature pomegranates within the area of the Holy of Holies, which are significant, I think. We also have excavated a gate just north of that. And so, of course, the Bible refers to the gate of Shiloh, and it looks like that's what we are excavating there. And then a large fabisa or bone deposit to the east of the monumental building. And this is what I believe are the remains of the biblical sacrificial system, the bones, the pottery, and the special objects, gold and silver objects that were part of the offerings that people brought to Shiloh. Now, Along the way, within those three structures, we have thousands and thousands of small finds, scarabs and bulla and beads, 2,000 pieces of pottery every day, about 1,000 coins so far that we've excavated, and stone vessels from the Second Temple period, and just rings and jewelry and weapons and armaments. So it goes on and on. Just a vast amount of material that we have recovered. But I would say the three main things are the monumental building, the gate complex, and the favisa.
Fascinating. So I watched your one documentary, I believe. So you stated that you know probably where was the very place where Ark of the Covenant was. So how do you know where was it exactly?
Okay, so the monumental building that we are excavating is perfectly east-west. And the Bible says that the tabernacle, and of course the temple later, was perfectly east-west. It matches the dimensions, the size given to us in the Bible for the tabernacle, and it's divided on 2-to-1 ratios. So in other words, you have the whole building, and then it's cut with like one part here and then two parts here. So a 2-to-1 ratio, which is again how the Bible describes the tabernacle. Within the smaller area to the west is where the Holy of Holies would have been, and that's the area that we are just now finished excavating, and it's I find it utterly fascinating. And within that area is where we're finding these very small pomegranates with the holes on them where they can be attached to garments, which is consistent with what you read in the Bible as well, that the priest had bells and pomegranates on the hems of their garment.
Oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know about that. So I wonder, what is the earliest history of this site?
Absolutely. Shiloh was first occupied in what we would call the Middle Bronze Age 2 period. Now, there may have been a small occupation before that, but the first real evidence that we have is, say, around 1750 BC. Around 1650 BC, what we call the Middle Bronze Age 3 is when the big fortification system was built at Shiloh. So these were Amorites or Canaanites or Amorites who were living at the site. When the Israelites arrive in Joshua chapter 18, notice that there was no battle, there was no conflict, even though we know that people were living there. So these people voluntarily join in with the Israelites, just like they did at Shechem to the north. So remember Joshua chapter 8, when the Israelites arrived at Shechem with Mount Gerizim on one side, Mount Ebal on the other, and they renewed the Abrahamic covenant there as Moses had told them to do, the Shechemites join in with them as well. So there's no battle. So my view is that Shiloh was part of the Shechem city-state in the late Bronze Age, and that city-state had made an alliance with the Israelites. And we see the same thing, by the way, in the Amarna letters. You have the famous el-Amarna letters from the middle of the 14th century. And the very same thing, there's an alliance that is formed between the Habiru and the people of Shechem. And very interesting that we see the same thing in the Bible.
All right, so let me ask this hard question because people divide on this one, but I cannot. Yeah, I must ask this. Yeah, people believe in late and early Exodus and conquest of Joshua. So, would you say, as an expert in this site, does any detail reject any of those theories? Yeah, or would you
Mm.
say it accepts both of them?
Well, if I'm right about the age of the building and of the favisa, the material within the favisa, which I believe is from the biblical sacrificial system, the pottery is very datable pottery. And so it's a classic form of late Bronze Age 2A pottery. So it starts in the late Bronze Age 2A, in other words, in the 14th century. So if I'm right, and that favisa is just outside the monumental building, then it could not be a late date because the pottery would be too early for that. So the material culture at Shiloh is more consistent with the early date of the Exodus.
Yes, but could it be that that was of someone else than Israelite? Is there a possibility?
It is possible. Of course, we can't prove this, but I would point out that the bones within the favisa, and we have about 20,000 bones from this favisa, that they are disproportionately from the right side of the animal. We have more right-sided bones than left-sided bones. And that's an indication also from the Bible. Leviticus chapter 7 says that the right side of the animal is the priest's part of the animal. And of course, that's who lives at Shiloh, are the priests. Also, within the core favisa, 99.9% of the bones are kosher bones, bones from young animals, bones from the sacrificial system. And this is unheard of because even at Israelite sites, normally it's 99% kosher and 1% not kosher. Here we have 99.9% kosher. Again, evidence of an Israelite sacrificial system, not a Canaanite sacrificial system.
Yes, thank you. But why that 1% or 0.1? Where we have big bones or something like even
Well,
in
in
small.
this Well, it's not pig bone in this case. Sometimes you do get that at sites, just contamination. But yeah, just literally contamination. You get later people dig, and bones get moved around or whatever. Also, you have earthquakes that take place in that region, and so you can have slight movements in the soil. But to say 0.1%, you're talking about a few fish bones or something like that, that even a rodent from the surface, a rat or something, a mouse from the surface can dig down and create a hole and a bone falls in or something like this.
Yes, thank you so much, Professor Stripling. Now, next question. Is there any archaeological evidence indicating a sudden end of occupation at Shiloh, possibly related to the Philistine attack mentioned in 1 Samuel 4?
Yes, there is. We have a site-wide destruction that dates to about 1075 BC. The Bar-Ilan University excavation back in the early 1980s, they did 4 seasons of work at Shiloh. They found it in Area C on the western edge of the site. We have found it in areas H and K. So clearly we do have this, and we were able to, using ceramic typology and radiocarbon dating, date this to about 1075 BC. I can't prove that it's the Philistines, but that does match the biblical date for when the Philistines would have, if it was destroyed at that time, then it would very likely be the Philistines. The Ark of the Covenant is captured at Ebenezer, and the Bible never says that the Philistines destroy Shiloh. It hints or suggests that, like in Psalm 78, for example, but it doesn't come right out and say it. But here, I think archaeology can illuminate the biblical text, and based on what we have found, we can say with a pretty high degree of certainty that the Philistines did destroy Shiloh about 1075 BC.
Yes, that's really amazing. So, is there any challenge from minimalists such as Finkelstein and others? Are there some disputes about those datings and something like that?
Well, those dates, no, because Finkelstein, who was the director of the Bar-Ilan University excavation in the 1980s, he found the same destruction layer in Area C on the west. Pardon me, I think he dated it to 1050 or 1060, and ours dates, we're just saying maybe 1075. So no, there's not really any disagreement about that date. The disagreement with minimalists, to use your term, would be on the earlier period. For example, Professor Finkelstein had dated the favisa because they were the first ones who identified this favisa back in the 1980s. Now, in order to have a favisa, of course, you have to have a temple. And now of course, they did not find that. We then found the temple that was right next to it, the building that we're now talking about. He surmised in his mind that there was a Canaanite temple that would have been on the summit of Shiloh, and that when the Israelites arrived around the year 1200, that they removed all the remains of the Canaanite sacrificial system and deposited them on the eastern edge of the site in what we call Area D. So he thought these were remains of a Canaanite sacrificial system. Of course, in his mind, there's a late date for the Exodus. If now, I'm not even sure he believes that there was an Exodus, but back then he did. Whereas I believe that there was an earlier date, a 14th century date, and I think that the pottery within the Favisa is very consistent with that date. And the
That's quite
radiocarbon,
amazing.
I should say, because he did not do any radiocarbon dating of the Favisa, and we have, and it is also consistent with the 14th century date.
Amazing. Thank you again. So, how precise are radiocarbon dating? Because I heard from some people and scholars that if we date some earlier things, it gives some shifts and it needs calibration. So, can you say about that?
Well, yes, you're right. It is not nearly as simple as we make it sound oftentimes. So we do use radiocarbon dating, and if we collect the samples correctly, and there's no contamination in the process of collecting them, and they're tested properly and then calibrated properly, then they are generally very accurate, plus or minus 30 years. Some would say maybe plus or minus 20 years, but I would, at least plus or minus 30 normally is what we would say. And yes, there can be problems. Like we have something called the radiocarbon offset or the carbon 14 offset in the southern Levant. So when you get prior to 1400 BC, the dates don't match perfectly the way that earlier, sorry, later, they're matching the ceramic dates and the glyptic dates, like inscriptions. Now they begin to stray away the further back that you go before 1400 BC. So that's probably what you've heard referred to as a further calibration of the dates. Fortunately for us, we're looking at dates right around 1400 or a little after 1400. So hopefully that carbon offset is not going to affect our results.
Yes, it makes sense. Thank you. So, regarding the United Monarchy, can you say something about that period, 10th century? What happened at Shiloh at those times?
So Shiloh is destroyed, as I said, about 1075 BC. It's then rebuilt about 980 BC. So just after, so this is during the time of the United Monarchy. So when you see this building program across Israel during the time of David's reign, that's when Shiloh was rebuilt. And so it seems to me that this is evidence of this growing unification under Saul, David, Solomon, and Rehoboam, the period of the United Monarchy. So that's when Shiloh is rebuilt and begins to flourish again.
Yes, and those days are disputed by some scholars or no?
Yes, but not as much as some people let on. I mean, the large majority of scholars do believe that there was a united monarchy, that there was a time of growth in the what we would call the Iron Age 2A period, which is when Shiloh was rebuilt. And so, some have argued, like Finkelstein, for example, how significant it was. But now, based on the inscriptions we have of David, for example, the House of David inscription and so forth, I think there's very wide acceptance of the fact that there was a united monarchy. How big and how extensive it was, some might debate that.
Great. And how much people lived in the time of the 10th century, let's say?
At Shiloh,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, just a few hundred people. I mean, it wasn't a really large place, but let's say that you had living inside the city and outside the city no more than 500 people. So it was probably half that, 250 people, something like that. Kind of a typical village in the highlands of Israel at that time.
Okay, that's super helpful. So, my next question about the Ark of the Covenant. Yeah, can you say more about that? What are the evidence that points to existence of that sanctuary beside that you mentioned in the introduction?
Okay, so we have a building that we believe has a Holy of Holies within it, and the whole point of having a Holy of Holies would be so that the Ark of the Covenant would be there. The Bible says that it was there. We have the Madaba map, a 6th century map from Madaba, which is at St. George's Church in Jordan, which on the map, which is the oldest map we have of the Holy Land, on the map it has Shiloh on there, and it says the Greek inscription under Shiloh says where the ark stayed or where the ark rested. And so, we have an inscription that says that it was at Shiloh. Jerome and other early church, sources refer to the same thing. And then we have the biblical account, and then we have the building that we're excavating.
Yes. So sorry for this question, but what do you think? What happened with Ark? Do you think it's destroyed or hidden somewhere? What do you think?
Yeah, I really don't know. I know what all the theories are and all the possibilities, but I really don't I don't know more than anyone else does about where it might be, and my opinions are only opinions. I don't have any proof to back them up.
Oh, yeah, that's honest. Thank you so much. So, this one is interesting. According to Richard Elliott Friedman, the priesthood of Shiloh was the earliest source of the documentary hypothesis and also provided much of the material of the Deuteronomistic history. With the writer of this history, Jeremiah or somebody closely connected to him, being a descendant of these priests. Is this a good guess? And is there any evidence for this hypothesis?
I do not accept the documentary hypothesis. So the whole basis of the JEDP sources, I realize there's editing or redaction that goes on in the process of formulating the biblical text, but the whole basis of JEDP, I reject altogether. So I would have to differ with Professor Friedman on that point.
Okay, but would you say that there were some, at least scribes at Shiloh at, yeah, late Bronze Age, early Iron Age?
Well, we don't have any proof of that. The Bible doesn't say that there were, and we haven't found evidence of that in our excavations. But maybe there were? Sure. We have a prophet in the time of the United Kingdom and right in the transition into the divided kingdom named Ahijah. Ahijah the prophet from Shiloh. And so even though the Ark of the Covenant wasn't there and the Tabernacle wasn't there, there was a notable prophet who was there. So whether he was a writing prophet or not, we don't know, but he could have been, but we don't have proof of it yet.
Okay, thank you. So I wonder now for the end, what does your excavation team look like? What technologies and methods are used in your fieldwork? And what does a typical day at the site look like? Can you describe that?
Sure. Well, let me start with the day first. We have breakfast at 4 in the morning, and we leave our hotel at 5 in the morning. We arrive at Shiloh at about 5:30. This way we beat the heat and we beat the traffic. Our hotel is in Jerusalem and Shiloh is about 30 minutes away. And we work until 2 o'clock every day. And then we're back in Jerusalem at about 3. We have then meetings when we get back where we're examining finds, and supervisors have responsibilities, but volunteers then have a little bit of time off. And then we have every other night a lecture, a meeting, and that's at 5:30. Then dinner is at 6:15, and then everybody tries to go to bed as soon as they can because they have to get up early again the next morning. So that's kind of how the day flows. As far as our protocols for excavation, it's very advanced, really, in comparison to what it has been in the past. We excavate on a grid with 5 by 5 meter squares. And within those squares, we have a supervisor, an assistant supervisor, a team of about 10 people, usually within a square team. And they are excavating, and then they are dry sifting or sieving the soil and letting the dirt flow through. We take samples of all the soil. We do flotation on that so that we can recover very small seeds. Along the way, we're taking radiocarbon samples and other types of samples. We excavate about 2,000 pieces of pottery every day. So, all of this is being processed so we know exactly where it came from. Then the material that has been dry sifted is taken down to our wet sifting station where we wash it. And then that removes all the dirt. And then we can see things that we couldn't see before, like small finds like beads and bulla and scarabs and stuff like this. So this takes more time, but the payoff is enormously important for us. And then we recreate everything, of course, on computer. We're photographing constantly. We're flying drones at the end of the day. We're drawing and creating photogrammatic reconstructions. We have specialists on site like a zooarchaeologist, an anthropologist, a geologist, a ceramic typologist, a numismatist. So these are the specialists that as we are recovering these finds, they're studying them, a botanist also who's studying the seeds. So everything is being studied and classified so that we know what level it came from, and then we can write our reports correctly. And in the end, we can understand what life was like in biblical times. We can publish our articles and make sure that we have accurate information.
Oh, sounds like a hard work. So, yes, do you have any future plans about excavations and anything on that side?
I have about 3 more years of excavation at Shiloh. We've been here since 2017, and I think it will take me about 3 more seasons to finish the work that we have started in those 3 areas that I was talking about.
Professor Stripling, do you have any conclusion about that site? Is there anything that bothers you and is a hard question and that you don't know maybe something and yeah, problematic?
Hmm. That's a good question. Nothing's jumping out at me at the moment as far as mysteries that need to be solved. Along the way there have been, but now after seven seasons of excavation, I think we've got a really clear idea of the levels, the stratification, and how it all fits.
Okay, so Dr. Stripling, thank you for your time. I enjoyed and learned much about this site. It was amazing. So keep up good work. I know that even some scholars that don't like your idea about Exodus will respect you as a great excavator. So thank you for that.
Well,
And
thank
yeah, dear audience, please subscribe to our channel, NT Podcast, like, comment, and ask question if you want for Dr. Stripling. And yeah, that's it. Thank you and see you next time.
thank you. Take care.